You sent them how many planes? Well, that's great. Now they can really fight back, right? What? No, they've all been destroyed, but didn't they just get there 2 days ago? Oh, that's not good. Okay. April 25th, 1942. If you have an intelligence unit and you've sort of cracked some of the enemy's main code and have a rough idea of how it works, what would be the best thing for you to have to expand on that? Tons and tons of the enemy's radio traffic. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Japanese advance through Burma continued, and Burma Corps Commander William Slim ordered the destruction of local oil installations to prevent them falling into Japanese hands. There was a bit of a black eye for Japan, however, as Tokyo was bombed by American B-25 bombers in the Doolittle Raid. That had a bunch of quick repercussions, even though the bombing itself did very little damage. For one thing, it caused the Imperial Japanese Navy to send out pretty much every warship of the combined fleet at the beginning of this week to try and catch Admiral Bull Halsey's task force, the ships that had launched the assault planes. It easily gets away, but this action has some unintended consequences. Here's a little backstory. Japan had a plan to mount an amphibious assault that was to take Port Moresby last month, called Operation MO. This was to have aerial support from only land-based bombers from Rabaul and seaplanes from new bases. But an American air raid back on March 10th alerted Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue that there was an enemy carrier force in the area. So he wanted to postpone MO until he could bring in Japanese carrier support to ensure aerial superiority. Combined Fleet Commander Isoroku Yamamoto allowed him to postpone it till May. During the wait for that carrier support, Inoue has taken the time to build a defense perimeter from the Solomon Islands to the Philippines. Well, now on the 23rd, Inoue issues South Seas Force Order Number 13 to resume operations against Port Moresby. He will have the fleet carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku and the light carrier Shoho for the first 2 weeks of May with his 4th Fleet. A lot of the communications for this operation and other plans for Phase 2 of the Japanese offensives against places like Fiji and Samoa are picked up, however, by Allied communications monitors. The Pacific Radio Intelligence Center at Melbourne and the Hypo one at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, are now reading a lot of Japanese radio traffic. See, back in February, they realized that a change from Japan's Baker 7 to Baker 8 cipher was only in the keying method. Successful penetration of the new cipher in February 1942 meant that all the work done since before Pearl Harbor on code recoveries and on the Baker 8 cipher could be applied to the JN25 messages intercepted until the cipher changed again. Capitalizing on the breakthrough by increasing the number of key personnel working on the Baker 8 cipher and JN25 code recoveries, the U.S. Navy, within a month, gained the ability to read all intercepted messages sent in this enciphered code. By mid-April, Japanese messages were being intercepted, decrypted, translated, re-enciphered, and disseminated by Hypo within 6 hours of their original transmission. This week, Hypo intercepts 2 messages revealing that the MO strike force includes a cruiser division, a carrier division, and possibly submarines. They know that the attack is against Port Moresby. They do not, however, have the answer to the question, when? But they do get a boon from the whole Japanese Navy looking for Halsey's task force this week. See, all those ships generate tons and tons of radio traffic, and that's added to the further tons and tons that are being assembled to try to figure out Japan's coming moves. Now, Japan's main naval operation code the Allies call JN25, the code I just mentioned. And it's different from the diplomatic codes that we've seen were already broken. It is a standard cipher that's made from 2 code books. One that has 45,000 randomly chosen 5-digit groups of numbers, each assigned to an operational word or phrase of kana, the phonetic version of Japanese. Then the group is added to similar successive groups from Book 2, and then when the message is transmitted, first they send a key that gives the page, column, and line in the second book that decodes the message, and that can then be translated by using the first book. The 3 days of the search is a mega bonus for analysts. See, they know the purpose of this hunting operation in progress, to find the task force. And since there are so many ships generating traffic about that operation, they can figure out loads and loads of operational 5-digit groups for their partially completed Book 1. The Japanese Navy had been planning to change the code April 1st for security reasons, but they figured it was too hard to crack, so it's been postponed to May 1st. American Admirals Chester Nimitz and Ernest King meet today in San Francisco to discuss immediate Pacific strategy based on intelligence gathering. That meeting will take a few days. We'll see soon what they decide. There is an American carrier at work this week, though, in the Mediterranean. It is the Wasp, and escorted by British battlecruiser Renown, 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers, brings 47 planes, Spitfires, to Malta. This is Operation Calendar. But of the 46 that arrive, 30 of them are pretty much immediately destroyed by Axis bombers. The Luftwaffe have anticipated their arrival, and the rest are destroyed within 48 hours. Lieutenant General Sir William Dobbie, Governor-General and Commander-in-Chief of Malta, writes to Winston Churchill, "It is obvious that the very worst may happen if we cannot replenish our vital needs, especially flour and ammunition, and that very soon." Churchill thinks Dobbie should have ensured proper protection for this convoy and an earlier shipping one that was sunk, and he will replace Dobbie with Lord Gort in just a couple of weeks. The Luftwaffe is also doing some bombing on Britain itself this week. Germany's Baedeker raids begin. These get their name from the German tourist guidebooks, supposedly from a comment from the German Foreign Office the 24th. "We shall go out and bomb every building in Britain marked with 3 stars in the Baedeker Guide, and are Adolf Hitler's reprisals for the recent RAF bombing campaign that targeted residential areas in Germany and destroyed much of Lübeck and Rostock. Exeter is the first hit on both the 23rd and 24th. Bath, Norwich, York, and Hull will all be hit in the near future. In the first 5 days of the campaign, 938 civilians are killed, but Luftwaffe losses are too heavy, especially for the damage inflicted, for them to continue much longer, particularly with the need for them in the Mediterranean and the Soviet Union. The British and their allies are fighting on the ground this week against the Japanese in Burma. Bill Slim has the 1st Burma Division attempt to break out of being trapped by the Japanese the 19th, while the Chinese 38th will attack the enemy from the north. Together with parts of the 7th Armored Brigade, they attack and cover the withdrawal of the 1st Burma. Meanwhile, the Chinese 55th Division is pretty much destroyed by the Japanese 56th, and the Japanese take the bridge at Loikaw. This leaves the road to Lashio undefended. Lashio is the terminus of the Burma Road. Harold Alexander, Slim's superior and in overall command of the British forces in Burma, has a dilemma in his choice of retreat. Does he follow the Chinese 66th Army north into China, where there's no guarantee of supplies, or does he cross the roadless mountains into northern India? He chooses India. So Slim has to outpace the Japanese and advance up the Chindwin River to get his 13,000 troops across the Chin Hills into India. Chinese commander, the American Joe Stilwell, will retreat north towards Miat Kiana with the 3 divisions still under his control. So all the Allied military forces are giving up Burma and making tracks. Japan had profited brilliantly from its occupation of a central strategic position in Indochina, Formosa, the Marianas, Marshalls, and Carolines to strike east, south, and west against the scattered colonial possessions of its chosen enemies and their divided forces, and to overwhelm them one by one. On April 22nd, when Alexander accepted defeat and set out across the mountains into India, only one Allied stronghold still resisted the Japanese inside the southern area. It was the American foothold in the Philippines. Well, sure, but they are not the only holdouts against the Axis powers, as the Soviets could tell you. The Soviets mounted offensive after offensive over the winter months, aimed at destroying German Army Group Center. That quieted down a bunch in March when the warmer weather brought the muds, although we've seen scattered action along the whole line. It is considered that April 20th, 1942 is the final day of the Rzhev-Vyazma offensive, when the Stavka ordered the forces of the fronts to go over to a defense on their present lines. During the operation, Soviet troops fully liberated the oblasts of Moscow and Tula and part of the Kalinin Oblast, but its main goal, the destruction of Army Group Center, was not achieved. But they did cause 1/3 German casualties, albeit at the cost of 750,000 of their own. But the 100,000 Germans that have been trapped in the Demyansk pocket for 2.5 months have made some progress recently in trying to break out. There has been a sketchy link between Demyansk and Staraya Russa, which also holds out against the Soviets, the Ramushevo corridor. And the Germans have widened that recently. They managed to actually break the siege finally this week, though they are still in serious need of relief. On the Soviet side, on April 23rd, the Volkhov front, much to Commander Kirill Meretskov's surprise, is disbanded. He is transferred to be Georgy Zhukov's deputy in command of the Western Front and will run the 33rd Army, replacing Mikhail Yefremov, who died last week, as we saw. What has happened is that General Mikhail Kozin, commander of the Leningrad Front, has convinced Joseph Stalin that with the Volkhov Front under his command as well, he could break the siege of Leningrad. Meretskov pleads with Stalin that this will surely be the end of Andrei Vlasov's isolated Second Shock Army once the ground fully thaws and they're trapped in the marshes, so they should be at least pulled back to the Chudovo-Leningrad road or rail lines. It was advice which Stalin and Malenkov ignored, and Vlasov's men were finally doomed to starve in the swamps. And on that sad note for Vlasov's men, I will end this week. A week of an ending to an offensive in the Soviet Union, one side conceding another one in Burma, bombs over Britain and Malta, and Japanese shipping generating tons of radio traffic for Allied intelligence to dig through. If Allied intelligence can figure out just when the Japanese plan to attack towards Port Moresby, they would still have to act on that intel to stop the attack, and that's not so easily done. Pearl Harbor has left the United States with no battleships and only a few aircraft carriers for the time being able to fight in the Pacific against 10 Japanese carriers, 6 fleet and 4 light, and 11 battleships. It's the world's largest carrier fleet and boasts the world's largest naval air force, over 500 planes. These are backed with dozens of cruisers, destroyers, and submarines, of course. Before the 18th, there had been a debate between the Japanese Navy General Staff and the combined fleet over the direction of the Pacific War. The staff wanted to advance into the southern areas and set up new bases and threaten Australia and cut seaward communications between Oz and the U.S. The combined fleet wanted a strategic victory over what remained of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and then after that, do whatever you want. But to get that victory, they would draw out those few carriers by attacking Midway Island, which they were pretty sure America would feel it had to fight for. Well, like I said, that had been a debate before this week. But the Doolittle Raid, small as it was, changed things. See, Halsey's task force had reached a position where it could launch the planes that hit Tokyo through the Midway keyhole in the Japanese defense perimeter. There is not one single Japanese naval officer right now that thinks the idea of allowing that gap to remain open is tolerable. I mean, allowing bombing of Tokyo would allow bombing of the emperor, right? And that would sort of imply a lack of concern for his well-being. So everyone is now on board for Yamamoto's plan to attack Midway Island. They're going to continue the Port Moresby plan first, sure, but as soon as the carrier used for that are finished their work, they are heading to the Central Pacific for Midway. Well, the Allies already know about the first part of that. and might well figure out the second part, and even all the details of dates and all from code breaking and intelligence. Not changing their codes might be a symptom that the Japanese are suffering from victory disease. But then again, their confidence may very well be justified. I mean, the Allies, well, the Americans, do not have the naval force to go head-to-head with the concentrated power of Japan's combined fleet. They do not. So even if they do come to know all the details, what in the world will they do? Did I hear someone say collectibles? Well, you, my friend, are in luck, because now, over at the Time Ghost Army Barracks, we have a whole line of collectibles. Shirts, mugs, posters, all that stuff. Check it out. There's a link below, and I bet something pops up here any second now. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Francois Provencher. Love that name. It is the Army that makes all our content possible, so join the Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv to get more and more and more of this. And do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.